So if you remember in chapter 6, we saw this correlation. We do not know who the author is of Hebrews, and then the other authors, we see Paul kind of touch on this, and we also see Peter in 2 Peter, scared me, touch on this about elementary teachings. So we can gather that these three people, Paul, Peter, and the author of Hebrews, are somewhat close with each other, or at least timeline-wise, in when these three documents were written, right? Basically, the author of Hebrews chapter 6 was saying that as Christians, we should move on. Like these are things that we should know. These are things that we don't necessarily or shouldn't be having to relearn over and over and over again, right? So it's the repentance and faith, right? Turning away from sin and believing in God. Baptism, the water baptism. Also, right, depending on your theology, the baptism of the Holy Spirit. Then there's the laying of the hands, believing in healing and prayer. And then, of course, the resurrection of the dead, the second coming of Jesus Christ, which is not necessarily the rapture. That's not the second coming. The second coming is after that. It's the millennial reign. But that's another topic for another day. And then, of course, eternal judgment, which takes place after the millennial time here on earth, right? So those are elementary teachings that the author of Hebrews kind of exhorts the people, these Jewish Christians, of like, guys, we shouldn't have to keep going over these things over and over again. And then he also mentions that instead of learning these things, that they should actually be teaching these things. So with that, we'll jump back in. And then, like I said, chapter 7, it repeats some of the same things. It brings up back Melchizedek, which we learned about, I believe it was like chapter 3 or 4. The king of the city of Salem, right? He was also a priest of God Most High. Many people believe that he might have been the first high priest, but he's also the high priest that God recognizes and kind of mirrors, or he mirrors Jesus, right? Jesus doesn't mirror him, but Melchizedek mirrors Jesus. There in the notes, it talks about how his name, Melchizedek, is basically translates from the king of righteousness and then the king of peace, because those are the two things that Jesus came for, right? So first, Jesus was the king of righteousness because he brought righteousness back to the earth. And then he was the king of peace as he died, sacrificed himself, resurrected himself. And then we moved into this period, which we call the grace period, which I want to touch on towards the end of this. And again, it kind of talks about, right, as we read it, when Abraham was returning home after winning a great battle against the kings, Melchizedek met him and blessed him. Then Abraham took a tenth of everything he had captured in battle and gave it to Melchizedek. The name Melchizedek means king of justice, and king of Salem means king of peace, right? What we discussed. We kind of get the sense that in many ways Melchizedek is considered to many like the Son of God. It's not that he is literally Jesus, but instead is that he is similar to Jesus in the kind of priesthood that he represented. And in the earlier chapters, we see that it was prophesied that a Messiah would come and follow the priesthood in the order of Melchizedek and not necessarily the order of Aaron. And that's important because which we'll talk about in the next few verses. But first it says, there is no record of his father or mother, talking about Melchizedek as we discussed in previous chapters, or any of his ancestors, no beginning or end of his life. He remains a priest forever, resembling the Son of God. I can't help but think that the fact that there is no record of him was not necessarily that he wasn't human, right? That he wasn't this kind of representation of Christ, which we talked about. It's not that was the case. At least when I am studying and thinking, I think that it was kind of purposely made that there would no record of him, so that he could be a representation of the priesthood that Jesus would kind of step into after he took place, right? It is interesting, though. There's a lot of different theories about Melchizedek, but we don't know for sure, because the Bible does not mention much about him other than in Genesis and then a little bit in Hebrews and throughout here and there of the Bible. But it is interesting, right? And then the next few verses talk about this idea. As we've gone through these first few chapters of Hebrews, we kind of see a hierarchy, right? Of we see Jesus, or we see God and Jesus, right? 3 in 1. And then we see the angels, right? And then we see Jesus when he came to earth, right? Surrendering his God label to humble himself beneath the angels as humans. And then we see humans. And then we kind of get a little bit an example here in which we have a heading. It says Melchizedek was greater than Abraham, right? And why is this important? What kind of water is this?
I don't know.
Where'd you get this from?
It's water.
But from where?
The restaurant.
Oh, okay. Like, I didn't know how to open this.
I have no idea. I did.
Oh, yeah, I see. Okay.
Yeah. There you go.
For a Christmas play right here. Tastes like tap water. But what restaurant was there? Felice's? That's where you got it from? How much was this water? Yeah. Water's water, right? Oh. I'll give a review once it gets cold. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good. It's fine.
It's really good. I've only gone once, but it's good.
We'll keep
I
this.
remember they brought us, we all wanted water, so they brought some.
Yeah.
I don't know how much they were.
Yeah. Water should be free. Yeah, so this next paragraph is talking about comparing Melchizedek and Abraham. And basically talking about how Melchizedek is greater than Abraham, right? So let's read it. It says, "Consider then how great this Melchizedek was. Even Abraham, the great patriarch of Israel, recognized this by giving him a tenth of what he had taken in battle. Now the law of Moses required that the priests, who are descendants of Levi, must collect a tenth from the rest of the people of Israel, who are also descendants of Abraham. But Melchizedek, who was not a descendant of Levi, collected a tenth from Abraham. And Melchizedek placed a blessing upon Abraham, the one who had already received the promises of God. And without question, the person who has the power to give a blessing is greater to the one who is blessed. The priests who collected tithes are men who die. So Melchizedek is greater than they are, because we are told that he lives on. In addition, we might even say that these Levites, the ones who collect the tithe, paid a tithe to Melchizedek when their ancestor Abraham paid the tithe to him. For although Levi wasn't born yet, the seed for which he came was in Abraham's body when Melchizedek collected the tithe from him." Right? Okay, so kind of here we see like prophecy that has been written, and I think this is why Melchizedek is kind of being a picture of Jesus, the ultimate high priest who was to come. Note the blessing here when we hear like they blessed him, or what that really means is the blessing here is not simple wishing of good to others, which may be done by inferiors to superiors, but it's the action of a person authorized to declare God's intention to bestow good things on another. Right? So when we see all throughout the Bible that they blessed, that this person blessed that, or Melchizedek blessed Abraham, it's basically the intention for God to continue to bless him, right? And it's interesting because we kind of see this dynamic in which even from the very beginning, even from before the Mosaic Law, even before Moses, we see this order that is starting to get into place. That yes, Melchizedek was the first priest, but then there were going to be others. But then as we get deeper into this chapter, there's one big problem when the priesthood begins to transfer to the others. And this is where we're going to jump into next. And it says, so if the priesthood of Levi, on which the law was based, right, could have achieved the perfection God intended, then why did God need to establish a different priesthood with a priest in the order of Melchizedek instead of the order of Levi and Aaron? And if the priesthood is changed, the law must also be changed to permit it. For the priest we are talking about belongs to a different tribe whose members have never served at the altar as priests. What I mean is our Lord came from the tribe of Judah, and Moses never mentioned priests coming from that tribe. Okay, so here we kind of see this dynamic in which Jesus, right, we know that he comes from the tribe of Judah. However, the priests all throughout the Old Testament after Melchizedek, because no one really knows where Melchizedek comes from or his bloodline, as we just read, the prophecy or under the law of Moses, it was not, the high priest would not come from the tribe of Judah, right? So then the question that the author is asking, then why did it all of a sudden change with Jesus? And he presumes that the reason that it changed is because the law was meant not necessarily to be walked into with perfection, right? And this is this first part talking about priesthood. Now we kind of get a picture of the entire, it might sound complicated right now, but if we really think about it, the entire book of Hebrews that we've been discussing is talking about priesthood, but it's what it's really getting to is the difference between the law and grace. And the changing of the tribe where the priesthood resides is when we enter the grace period. So that is when Jesus enters and he becomes the ultimate high priest. It means that there was a changing of the guard, that we no longer live under the law, but now that we live through the high priest, which is Jesus Christ, and he came to introduce the grace period in our lives. And under the law of Moses, God had strictly commanded that only those from the family of Aaron could serve at the altar and sacrifice. Jesus is not from the family of Aaron. He's not even from the tribe of Levi. The tribe of Judah, which is Jesus' lineage, had nothing to do with Aaron's priesthood. It had nothing to do in association with the law of Moses. Therefore, according to the priesthood of Aaron and the law of Moses, Jesus could technically never be priest, but that is because he is coming or becoming a priest under an entirely different principle. In order to be a high priest under the law, the only way you could do so is through hereditary or heredity, right? I don't know what that plural word is. So it was impossible, technically speaking, or by the book, for Jesus to become the high priest. However, Jesus did not come, and it's interesting because this lineage of high priests are part of the people who crucified Jesus. And we see that in, where is it? Right here, Matthew chapter 27, verse 1. It says, very early in the morning, the leading priests, talking about all the priests from the tribe of Levi and Aaron, and the elders of the people met again to lay plans for plotting Jesus' death. So it's interesting that these high priests were part of the reason why Jesus was crucified in the first place, why Jesus was put to death, and kind of introduces the changing of the guard, right? So I want to pause here, and there's more notes there, but I want to kind of summarize exactly and try to make this comparison of high priest in the beginning, in the Old Testament, that were under the law versus Jesus, who is now our high priest, under the order of Melchizedek, right? Because was Melchizedek a high priest under the law? No. For one, Melchizedek was not even among the people of Israel, right? It says Abraham didn't, he was the king of Salem. He was in the high priest in a different area. However, he did serve God. He was not, we don't know, was he an Israelite? More than likely not. So if Jesus is the high priest in the order of Melchizedek, then that means that Jesus as well is not in the order of the law, right? So I want to kind of make this comparison from the law and grace, right? And the question I want to ask is, what is grace? We can come back to that. So what is grace, right? Because I think we all kind of know what grace is, or we could have a definition. But I think it's important that we know for sure what grace is. Because there is, it's something we receive. Yeah, that's part of kind of the answer I have. So if it's received, then how does it work in our lives? Like what do we get? What do we gain when we receive the grace? Forgiveness. Yeah, it's not wrong, right? So let's dig a little bit deeper, right? And let's start a barometer. So grace, by definition, is something that's unmerited, something you don't do or earn, something that we can never pay back, and it's the favor of God. There's no amount of money that I could pay to earn grace. There's no amount of good deeds that I can do to earn grace. It's something that God freely gives us because he loves us and because he came and became the ultimate sacrifice for us. It is the favor of God, the unmerited favor of God. But then we see in 2 Corinthians chapter 12:19. And here is very interesting when I kind of heard someone teach about grace. And it kind of, something kind of clicked because I knew grace, but it kind of made it so much more important when I had this revelation of what grace truly is. So it says, 2 Corinthians chapter 12:9, it says, each time he said, my grace is all you need, right? And this is a verse we probably all heard. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weakness so that the power of Christ can work through me. So there's two key things here, or three key words that really jump out. And it's the second part of the first sentence where it says, my grace is all you need. And then it says, my power works best. And then at the end, the power of Christ can work through me. So this is the Apostle Paul speaking. And he's telling the church in Corinth that grace is all we need from God. So here we can gather, if we really break down this text, that there is some sort of power that we can gain through grace. And it's this ability that is unlocked in our lives when we receive the gift of grace. Right? So let's keep going forward. So grace is empowerment from God in my life to go beyond my natural ability. Right? If we go back to this, right? My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weakness so that the power of Christ can work through me. Right? That kind of makes sense, right? If grace is this gift, as we kind of all agreed it was, then that gift unlocks what the Apostle Paul says, this power of Christ in our lives. Right? And what does this power unlock? Well, it gives us an empowerment that I can go beyond my natural ability. Right? That grace is not a pardon to go sin, but it's a power to be received that teaches me how to deny ungodliness in my life, and it teaches me how to walk in my God-given potential. And when we think about grace, kind of the surface level definition of grace for a lot of people is that it's forgiveness from God. And yes, it's forgiveness from God. But there's a second part of that in which first it's forgiveness. And secondly, it should unlock and empower us to be able to go beyond our human ability. And if we think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Because what was the problem under the people living under the law? Right? Anybody? What was the problem while living under the law in the Old Testament? What?
Nobody was good enough.
Yeah. So no one could ever live up to the law. Right. So if no one could ever live up to the law, then all fell short of the glory of God. So therefore, Jesus comes, he dies on the cross, and he opens the door into this thing that we like to call the grace period, right? And what the grace period is, and yes, it's forgiveness. Yes, it's a loving God, but it also opens the door for us to not fall into condemnation of the law, but to be able to get back up and to be forgiven without the blood sacrifice that was needed in the Old Testament. Why? Because Jesus became the ultimate blood sacrifice for us when he came and he died and he resurrected. So it's this power of grace that gives me the ability to go beyond my natural ability, because my natural ability says that I am always going to fall short of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm always going to fall short of the glory of God. I'm always going to make a mistake. I'm always going to fall short. I'm always going to fall into temptation every so often, right? Maybe we don't do it every day, maybe we don't do it every minute, but we're eventually going to fall short. But it's this idea that grace is not just your ticket to forgiveness, but it's your ticket to get back up and to continue living a righteous life for God without shame, right? Because that is the idea of grace, that we live in this grace period, that we should not feel shame for our sin. So therefore, we are not technically sinners, we are saints, right? So I don't know if you ever heard people say that, right? I don't know if you ever heard people say that. They call themselves, I'm not a sinner, I'm a saint, right? A saint doesn't mean they're perfect, but it means that they operate in this grace from God, in which
Bound by your own.
it's living without shame, right? That sometimes I make a mistake, but it's not going to cripple me in shame and fear. And this is the idea that it is grace that allows us to be confident in our salvation, right? How many people here are confident that their name is written in the book of life, right? Hopefully, right? But some people are not, right? Some people are not as confident, right? But it's this idea that grace should make us confident, because grace is this ability that God gives us to go beyond our natural ability. That yes, we're going to fall short of the law, right? If I give you all 600 laws right now, we've probably fallen short many, many times, right? Tens and 20s and 30, maybe hundreds of times, if we're being honest. But it's this idea that grace gives us an ability to move on beyond our natural human ability, because that was ultimately the biggest issue in the law. Not to say that it was a mistake from God, right? But the law just shows us how much we needed Jesus in our life, how much we needed a Savior in our life. So grace, I want us to have this deeper definition of what grace is. And it's an empowerment in our lives, that we are able to go beyond our natural ability. And this is the grace that the Apostle Paul preached about. And if you know the Apostle Paul, right, if you know how kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? He was very stern, very, what's another word I can think of? Very, Like he was a very fire and brimstone type of preacher, right? It was that phrase was more popular in the 90s during the Pentecost revolution in Christianity, when a lot of these preachers were preaching fire and brimstone. They were, preaching like, you're gonna go to hell, like if you don't do that. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it, right? But they didn't hide. They weren't, I don't know. They were direct, right? And Paul, we see some of that as well throughout his writings. But he always talked about the grace of God. The grace of God is with you. The grace of God is with me. And it's this idea that Paul was so empowered by this grace that he wanted everyone to live this life with this power in their life. And it's this idea that I don't have to be limited by my human desires and my human mistakes. And that all changed in the grace period. That idea that could not be done under the law. That way of thinking, that way of living that could not survive under the law because we needed to make blood sacrifices. So we don't have to make blood sacrifice anymore in this grace period, right? And that's kind of the parting theme of Hebrews that we're seeing over these last few verses, in this different priesthood, this different period that we currently find ourselves in, right? Back to under the king or the priesthood of peace, which is Jesus Christ. That he is allowing us to operate in this grace period at the moment. And it's the idea in which that we don't have to be limited to our shortcomings when it comes to the law, right? Doesn't mean that he abolished the law, right? Jesus did not come to abolish the law. The Ten Commandments are still important, right? I can't look at the Ten Commandments and say, well, we can throw this one out, right? They're all still pretty important. In fact, Jesus raised the standard from the Ten Commandments. If you read his Sermon on the Mount, you see a lot of the Ten Commandments, and then he kind of raised the standard even more. The easiest example is one of the Ten Commandments says, thou shalt not murder, right? And what does Jesus say? That you have to love everyone, including your enemies, right? So don't just not kill your enemies, but you have to love them. So that's what we see all throughout Jesus' teaching. It's this raising of the standard from the law, and the only way we can meet that is through grace. This power that he gives us, that it may not feel like it or it may not look like it, but it's this ability to continue to go beyond our human barometer that we have, which is falling short of the law, but continue to live on because we do live in the grace period. A grace period that is going to end, right? Does anybody know when this grace period ends? Yeah, when does he come back? What? No. So Jesus does not come back until the millennial period. Before the millennial period, right? Right? The rapture is not his second coming. Yeah, because we meet him in the sky. So theoretically speaking, if you survive the rapture, if you survive the Great Tribulation, the tribulation and then the Great Tribulation, you could still be saved. Yeah. If you make it into the millennial period. Actually, something I did learn, or we are learning in theology, is that that there's going to be people who make it through the 7 years of tribulation. Because the Bible says in the book of Revelation that I believe it's 3/4 of the earth people will be killed, but there'll still be 25% of people still alive. So we do the math. Let's say there's a round number of, I know there's 7 billion, but let's say 10 for the math is easier. About 2 billion people that may still be alive. It's a lot of people still. It's like, it's a lot of people, yeah. So if you remember, right, the millennial period, what takes place in the millennial period? The 1,000 years, anybody know? Abby, you know? What happens in the 1,000 years after the 7-year tribulation? Jesus comes, he destroys Lucifer or the Antichrist. He throws them away. 1,000 years, we're here on earth. Everyone who is raptured comes down. The kingdom is established, and there will be prophets preaching the gospel in which those people could still be saved. If you survive the 7-year tribulation. Yeah, if you survive, you got to do all those things. So you got to survive without the sign of the mark of the beast, right? Maybe the doomsday preppers. I don't know. Yeah. Saving all that food. If you survive the earthquakes, the probably nuclear warfare that will be taking place, all that stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Yeah.
Does that include animals?
The what?
No. Like she said cucarachas.
Oh.
Like those really
Oh.
Well, there will be animals, but your pet probably won't be. Yeah. Well, because animals do not have souls, so yeah. They have feelings, but they don't have souls. I think the Bible says that somewhere.
The movie.
Because I mean, you gotta make that sense. If animals had souls, then we would be animals, and we would. I don't know. I mean, it's,
They have a movie of the dogs doing it.
I've seen it.
let's see. I thought there was a Bible verse about that. Let me see.
Well, it's because it mentions them there, but it doesn't
Noah saved that.
No one saved all that.
For nothing.
For what?
For nothing because they're not really.
Yeah, Noah saved. And then that's another thing, right? Didn't know, like.
Because then why in Revelation are so many animal references of like the face?
Well, the Garden of Eden, which is supposed to be a reflection of heaven, had animals. Yeah, I don't know if your pet turtle will be there, but yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that was an interesting thing that we were talking about in class. And I never thought about that, right? What about the people that survived the 7-year tribulation? It's interesting. Yeah.
All of them, that.
Yeah.
Seem like down, so that's when the tribulation right now.
Yeah. So also, like during this, how they say that the 2 prophets will be preaching during the 7-year tribulation, but they'll be preaching to the Israelites.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that includes the Gentiles as well, or the Gentiles' grace period ends, and then it opens up once everyone is reunited. I don't know. I don't know. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because at the end of the day, I mean, it's like this. Like they said, everyone will have an opportunity. And then someone asked the question, "What about those tribes, like in the third world country that never, like the what are they called? The uncontacted, something. No, aliens. Yeah. Yeah, they don't even. They have like their own languages, like they. It's crazy. And they kill them. They kill them. Yeah, there was a popular one, right? Like 10 years ago. Yeah. There's some that they
Go ahead.
yeah they'll whatever integrate. But there was one very popular that they killed him. But yeah, that
Oh, yes, right. But I did.
they what?
Cannibals. But they,
Oh, some of them are. I honestly don't know. Yeah. There was a movie about that. I remember we watched it in church one time. It's a long time ago, but I know there's like missions that is their like they,
To go there.
yeah, to go to those types of community colonies or whatever, communities and stuff like that.
the Bible says that until the whole earth moves, to like every corner of the earth. So that's why they try to do that. So there's every single
Yeah.
of our flat earth.
I mean, and then there's like, what is the context of those verses? Like, there's a lot of that goes into it. And then, like, I mean, that like the whole rapture stuff that happened, which is we're coming close to it, right? November 6th.
Yeah, we're close.
But yeah, it's interesting stuff. That's fine.
No, you're
Oh, my nose. Yeah, sorry. But yeah, so just any questions? I don't know. Any other questions?
That was my question.
What was your question?
About the animals.
Oh, the animals. Yeah,
I was worried about the
yeah. I'm sure there's.
You're coming. No, it's because
Or
we
do you
would
leave?
go. Oh no, I wasn't saying that. We
Oh.
would go. We talked to another. We would go with another lady,
Sister Ida.
and with Sister Ida, and she would tell us, "No, your pets are not gonna go to heaven. They
that's
can't
just
go."
the-
No, I know.
That's just a no. I mean, she just flat out.
She would no.
There's no pets in heaven.
And I was like,
Okay.
"Oh."
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know. Like,
I mean, Jesus comes back in a horse, a white horse. So how could there be no animals? Maybe they're not important in reason like
She stated, right?
like maybe they're not important like to mention because like as human beings we worry about ourselves, right? Like where are we going? What are we doing?
bless you.
Is it, what does it
When
say?
he comes back on a white horse, though, like there has to be an animal somewhere.
They don't have souls, right?
They don't have cells.
Souls.
Souls. Oh. I didn't know that dogs or animals
That's
didn't have
ChatGPT.
I mean, ChatGPT. I don't know. Sure, there's different.
It just depends. Well, if you ever find a clear answer, let me know.
When I die, that's the only time I have clear. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things that we don't know. We won't know for sure. And by the time we know, we might not even. Yeah. But yeah, all that stuff's interesting to me. And then the other one that we always debated was, what about the people that died from the Old Testament? Like, how did they get saved? But I don't know. Okay, so the schedule next week, we have Bible study the 29th. Then it's November 5th. We will have prayer. And then our last two sessions will be the 12th and the 19th.
November what? Biggest prayer?
Yeah, and then November 12th and 19th are our last two Bible studies. And then we are done for the semester.
Have they, project days you decided on?
The last,
It was either Monday or Tuesday.
yeah, the last that I had talked to them, but
Before 29?
usually, yeah, that day, those days. But I'll see if we email them soon. That way we can get a concrete date.
The schools are gonna be out all that week.
Yeah, they're
So
awful.
maybe we can go on vacation.
She wasn't joking.
Forget the turkeys.
Yeah, turkeys. Yeah. Yeah, and then the youth. Oh, the women have their event this Saturday, right? 25th. I forgot this Sunday. Oh, I announced it, didn't I? I don't know.
Yeah, but we need a flyer.
We'll post one tomorrow. And then the 31st is the youth one still going on, as far as I know.
Want me to invite her, but I'm not gonna invite her.
To the youth event? Oh.
Oh, your member's coming here.
Oh, that's true.